A lot happens to Jesus in the days between Palm Sunday and his Passion. We can't read all of it this week, but we can certainly get a good feel for it. That's what we're up to this week, walking with Jesus through Holy Week. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Monday, April 11th, 2022. If you've ever been on a trip abroad, or even to a place like Washington, D.C. or New York City, anywhere that tourists gather, you may have fallen prey to unscrupulous people seeking to make an easy buck off of you. Sometimes it comes in the form of crime, sleight of hand, or pickpocketing, where someone distracts you while another steals from you. Or it could be in the form of someone selling you something for a high price that only minutes later you find you could have bought for half the price, if not free. In either of these cases, you know you've been cheated. But what happens when the cheating is by the very people you believe you can trust? If we notice what's happening, it leaves us feeling jaded, resentful. All three of the Synoptic Gospels tell the story that either on the day of or the day after Jesus came into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, he entered the temple and went on something of a rampage against what we often call the money changers he found there. Even John tells the story, though he places it much earlier in his account of things. It is one of those episodes that, if we're not careful, can lead us to believe that the temple was nothing but a hopelessly corrupt place with no redeeming value. But a careful reading of Luke tells us a very different story. And he tells the story of the cleansing of the temple just ever so slightly differently from the others, so much so that we'll want to pay attention. As I read this brief episode from Luke, pay attention to what you hear. And just as importantly, pay attention to what you don't hear. Then he entered the temple and began to drive out those who were selling things there. And he said, "It is written, 'My house shall be a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers.'" Did you notice? There's just not as much detail here as in the other gospel accounts. In Matthew, for example, Jesus throws out everyone who's selling and buying. And he mentions money changers and those selling doves. Same in Mark. But in Luke, no mention of throwing out buyers, only sellers. No mention of money changers or sellers of doves. In Luke's account, we see Jesus driving out people who are selling things in the temple. So what gives? Are Matthew and Mark correct and Luke incorrect? Or is there something else going on here? Well, as you know, each of the gospel writers has a particular purpose in mind and thus a different way of telling the story. I cannot stress often enough that these writers were not trying to produce the kind of historical account you and I are accustomed to reading in the modern world. It's not that they made stuff up. Rather, they were very selective in their choice of details. And often their choice of details supported their overall narrative. In Luke's Gospel, the temple holds a special place. It figures into the birth narrative of Jesus and in the only Gospel account of his childhood, where he stays in Jerusalem to study with the elders in the temple while his parents head back to Nazareth. The last verse in Luke's Gospel, in fact, tells us that the disciples were constantly in the temple, praying every day. Clearly, in telling the story of the cleansing of the temple, Luke is careful not to attack the temple itself, but rather a particular practice, selling stuff in the temple. So what Jesus is doing is not destroying the temple or attacking it, but as the traditional title of the episode suggests, cleansing it, purifying it, making it fit once more for its true and higher purpose, to be a place for the praise and worship of God. And what were people doing selling stuff there? Well, This episode takes place as Jews from all over the Holy Land and even from places farther afield made a pilgrimage to Jerusalem for one of the major festivals in the Jewish calendar, Passover. As tourists, as pilgrims, they would have been easy marks for people wanting to profit from their presence in Jerusalem. And since all of them would at some point or another have made their way into the temple, what better place for unscrupulous characters to make a quick buck? It was clearly a violation for Jesus of what the temple really stood for. But in cleansing the temple, Jesus would certainly have made some very important people angry. When we return tomorrow, Jesus gives these same people another poke in the eye. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.